Assalamu alaikum students. This is your English teacher. Today we are starting our lecture number 9. We have done half of chapter number 4, the Carew murder case. Today we are going to read the next half. Now I am going to read this chapter. Please listen to me carefully. This was brought to the lawyer the next morning before he was out of the bed, and he had no sooner seen it and been told the circumstances than he shoot out a solemn leap. "I shall say nothing till I have seen the body," said he. "This may be very serious. Have the kindness to wait while I dress." And with the same grave face he hurried through his breakfast and drove to the police station, whither the body had been carried. As soon as he came into the cell, he nodded. "Yes," said he, "I recognize him. I am sorry to say that this is Sir Danvers Carew." "Good grief, sir," exclaimed the officer. "Is it possible?" And the next moment his eye lighted up with professional ambition. "This will make a deal of noise," he said, "and perhaps you can help us to the man." And he briefly narrated what the maid had seen and showed the broken stick. Mr. Utterson had already quailed at the name of Hyde, but when the stick was laid before him, he could doubt no longer. Broken and battered as it was, he recognized it for one that he had himself presented many years before to Henry Jekyll. "Is this Mr. Hyde a person of small stature?" he inquired. "Particularly small and particularly wicked looking is what the maid calls him," said the officer. Mr. Utterson reflected, and then raising his head, "If you will come with me in my cab," he said, "I think I can take you to his house." It was by the same time about 9 in the morning, and the first fog of the season hung in the streets. The cab rolled slowly through the dark, dreary streets, and Mr. Utterson felt gloomy. As the cab drew up before the address indicated, the fog lifted a little and showed him a dingy street, a grubby eating house, a few shops selling cheap goods, many ragged children huddled in the doorways, and many people of different nationalities passing by. And the next moment the fog settled down again upon the part, as brown as umber, and cut him off from his lowly surroundings. This was the home of Henry Jekyll's favorite, of a man who was heir to $250,000 sterling. An ivory-faced and silvery-haired old woman opened the door. She had an evil face smoothed by hypocrisy, but her manners were excellent. "Yes," she said, "this was Mr. Hyde's, but he was not at home. He had been in that night very late, but had gone away again in less than an hour. There was nothing strange in that. His habits were very irregular, and he was often absent. For instance, it was nearly 2 months since she had seen him till yesterday." "Very well, then we wish to see his rooms," said the lawyer. And when the woman began to declare it was impossible, "I had better tell you who this person is," he added. "This is Inspector Newcomen of Scotland Yard." A flash of odious joy appeared upon the woman's face. "Ah," she said, "he is in trouble. What has he done?" Mr. Utterson and the inspector exchanged glances. "He doesn't seem a very popular character," observed the inspector, "and now just let us in." In the whole extent of the house, which but for the old woman remained otherwise empty, Mr. Hyde had only used a couple of rooms. but these were furnished with luxury and good taste. The cupboard was filled with food and drinks. The table was set with silver cutlery and fine china. Artwork hung upon the walls, a gift, as Utterson supposed, from Henry Jekyll, who was much of connoisseur, and the carpets were thick and expensive looking. At this moment, however, the rooms bore every mark of having been recently and hurried ransacked. Cloths lay about the floor with their pockets inside out. Drawers stood open, and on the hearth there lay a pile of grey ashes, as though many papers had been burned. From these embers, the inspector disinterred the stub of green checkbook, which had resisted the action of the fire. The other half of the stick was found behind the door, and as this clinched his suspicions, the officer declared himself delighted. A visit to the bank, where several £1,000s were found to be lying to the murderer's credit, completed his gratification. "You may depend upon it, sir," he told Mr. Utterson. "I have him in my hand. He must have lost his head, or he never would have left the stick, or, above all, burned the checkbook. He will need money to live. We have nothing to do but wait for him at the bank and get out the wanted posters." This, however, was not so easy to accomplish, for few people knew Mr. Hyde. Even the master of the servant maid had only seen him twice. His family could nowhere to be traced. He had never been photographed, and the few who could describe him differed widely, as common observers will. Only on one point were they agreed, and that was the haunting sense of strangeness with which he left people. Now, students, I am going to tell you difficult words. Circumstances, halat, solemn, pukhta, ambition, ख्वाहिश, narrated, बयान किया, recognize, पहचानना, particularly, खास तौर पर, dingy, मट्टी से अटा हुआ, रूबी, गंदा, स्टर्लिंग, बरतानिया की करेंसी, evil face, शरीर चेहरा, smooth, हमवार, hypocrisy, मुनाफिकत, irregular, बेकायदगी, odious, नाखुशगवार, glances, नजरें, connoisseur, माहिर, disinterred, निकालना, clinched, पकड़ा हुआ, declared, ऐलान करना, gratification, खुशी, trace, ढूंढना, widely, वसी पैमाने पर.
Now I am going to explain you this chapter in Urdu. Mr. Utterson एक वकील थे. इनको सारा मामला बताया गया तो इन्होंने कहा, मैं पहले डेड बॉडी देखूंगा, फिर कुछ कहूँगा. फिर वो वहाँ पहुँचकर डेड बॉडी देखकर अफसोस का इजहार करते हैं, और जब इन्हें स्टिक दिखाई जाती है तो वो काफ़ी हैरान होते हैं, क्योंकि वो नायाब स्टिक इन्होंने ही हेनरी जैकल को गिफ्ट करी थी. मिस्टर अटरसन कहते हैं, आप मेरी टैक्सी में मेरे साथ हाइट के घर चलें, क्योंकि वो नायाब स्टिक इन्होंने ही हेनरी जैकल को गिफ्ट की थी. मिस्टर अटरसन कहते हैं, मेरी टैक्सी में मेरे साथ चलें, मैं आपको हाइट के घर ले चलता हूँ. मिस्टर अटरसन और पुलिस इंस्पेक्टर हाइड के घर पहुंचते हैं तो एक औरत दरवाज़ा खोलती है और बताती है कि हाइड घर पर नहीं है। मिस्टर अटरसन कहते हैं कि हम अंदर आकर कमरे की तलाशी ले सकते हैं, तो औरत मना कर देती है कि यह नामुमकिन बात है। तो मिस्टर अटरसन कहते हैं ये इंस्पेक्टर हैं, इनको इजाज़त है, तो औरत इन्हें कमरे में ले जाती है। मिस्टर अटरसन कमरे की तलाशी लेते हैं। घर बहुत खूबसूरत सजा हुआ था। कमरे को देखकर लग रहा था कि कोई बहुत उजलत में चीज़ें लेकर गया है। अलमारी की दराज़ें खुली हुई थीं, चिमनी में राख थी जैसे कुछ कागज़ जलाए गए हों। एक ग्रीन चेकबुक भी थी जो जलने से बच गई थी। बैंक से पता चला कि कातिल के अकाउंट में काफ़ी पैसे हैं। इंस्पेक्टर ने कहा कि एक ना एक दिन कातिल बैंक पैसे लेने ज़रूर आएगा, तो हम इसे गिरफ्तार कर लेंगे। लेकिन ये इतना आसान नहीं था क्योंकि बहुत कम लोग मिस्टर हाइड को जानते थे और गवाह औरत ने भी इसे सिर्फ 2 दफ़ा देखा था। इसकी फैमिली का भी कुछ पता नहीं था और इसकी कोई तस्वीर भी नहीं थी। लोग बस यही कहते थे कि वो एक पुरस्कार शख्सियत का मालिक था। This is the end of today's lecture. Please read the chapter carefully and memorize the typical words and also improve your pronunciation.